documents here from basically the city of Philadelphia that, no one can argue that those are inadmissible. So I'd like to sort of set the table for her testimony.
Again, I apologize. Sharon, you said you sent me that.
Yes, I sent it to all the board members. I can resend it now. It's the entire exhibit packet and it includes the resume.
Mr. Bonney?
Should the board please, I'm happy to stipulate to many of the documents that Mr. Bonney wants to show. Their public record. We already included maps, if not this precise map, additional maps exactly like this are already in the record. They've already been testified to. This board set a 1-hour time limit to complete this hearing today. This is obviously the third hearing already for this case after 2 continuances to further meet with the community, which we did. So this matter needs to get completed today and can't be unnecessarily delayed by retestifying about matters which have already arisen.
We're not
Correct.
Can I continue, please, in the interest of time?
Please continue.
Okay. Showing on my screen, just to remind everyone what this site is, it's this large wooded area in the middle, this green area. And that's what that's where the site is. I want to go over the zoning code that protects steep slopes in 14704, section 14704 of the zoning code.
Could you enlarge that, Paul?
Absolutely. The city has first a section that's called intent.
That's good, thank you.
Intent that says the open space and natural resources standards of this section are intended to promote safe and compatible development throughout the city of Philadelphia that avoids adverse impacts and degradation of the environment through, among other things, protection of steep slopes. To jump to the zoning code has a map that shows where the steep slopes are in the city, and in this sub map number 1, I highlighted in green approximately where this property is. And then, of course, the prohibition itself is in subsection B, where it says in point 1 that you can impact steep slopes that are not of a steep grade, but in subsection point 2, it says on those portions of the lot where the slope of land is 25% or greater, no site clearing or earth moving activity is permitted. So that's the prohibition at issue, and that's why the applicant is seeking the variance that it is. Here is a page from the open maps of Philadelphia, which shows the
very quickly. I'm not going to object again. I'm willing to stipulate as to all of this. Mr. Bonney
I'm
already
presenting my case
to do an
Hold
opening.
on, Paul, let's hear Mr. Whalen.
Mr. Bonney already had the opportunity to do an opening. I already had the opportunity to present my whole case. This is already in the record. He can put all of these documents in. The board can certainly look at them. I will stipulate to all public records. This hearing was continued to today for only 1 hour, solely for the basis for Mr. Bonney to present his witnesses, because that's where we were in the stage of the case, and then for the community at large, planning commission and councilmen to put their positions on the record. So again, I'm not objecting. I'm just happy to stipulate to move this along.
I'm
Understood.
okay.
Could you not stipulate, Paul? What's the objection to stipulating?
Well, I don't want to present my case by email. I want to present my case by Zoom. I'm presenting my case. I'm trying to persuade the board. I'm walking them through the documents in the quickest way possible. And I'd like to continue. This is our...
Excuse me, Mr. Bonney. I think that what we were expecting as far as the documents is that you would simply read a list identifying each document and the board would recognize that they had been accepted into the record. Not any real level of detail going line by line. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to meet you halfway and go as quickly as I can, but this is the presentation of our case.
Do you know what? We do have 1 hour.
I
Did we-
understand.
Did we not have this presentation in the past? Or are you providing us with
No.
any information today that we already have not seen?
I am.
Well,
I'll continue.
could you zero in on those issues that you have not yet presented?
I will. This is the city comprehensive plan that has a section, and I won't read all of it, but I'll say that right here in the middle, that deforested development, this is all about land suitability and the protection of steep slopes. And so the objective is to protect steep slopes from development. I'll continue. This is the lower Northwest District Plan, which is obviously irrelevant to this case. And it too speaks of prohibiting earth moving where the slope exceeds 25%. I am also showing you a map of the lower Northwest District that shows in rust color, it's this dark orange rust color, all the areas in the lower Northwest District that have steep slopes. So as you can see, it's quite pervasive in this district, and it's not some, so I'll continue.
Just to be clear, Mr. Bonney, the 2035 plan was already presented in full and accepted by the board as an exhibit. So you don't need to walk through anything that the board already has before it.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd now like to go through a new document from the City of Philadelphia called the Tree Canopy Assessment Report. And this talks about the benefits of trees. I will keep going. This talks about here on the upper right that a lot of the tree removal is the clearing of large patches for new construction. I won't read everything I was going to read because I'm sure the board will read this when it reviews these documents. Of course, the recommendation is to preserve the tree canopy. And the analysis of this particular zip code is that there's 3% loss, a relative loss in tree canopy over the past 10 years in this particular zip code. I would now like to call Ms. Kishenshand as the witness, and I'm showing her resume on the screen. And I'm going to talk about her qualifications, and then I'll give Mr. Whalen the opportunity to cross-examine on qualifications, but
Excuse me, Mr. Bonney, the board has her qualifications in front of them in the resume. Could you just briefly describe what you are intending to have her, what you expect her to testify to?
Okay. Well, I expect her to testify of the benefits of these forested steep slopes that supports this urban forest. And she's going to talk about the benefits to nature, the benefits to human beings. And that's what she's going to talk about, sort of the benefits of trees to nature and human beings and wildlife, and sort of generally speaking. And also that the tree canopy in East Falls has been decreasing. East Falls in particular has been decreasing over the years. That is what she's going to testify to. She's not going to talk about, E equals MC squared or any sort of high degree of scientific analysis. She's talking about things that she's learned and advocated for and taught other people about over her 25-year history of being involved with preservation and increasing the tree canopy in the city of Philadelphia. She's participated on a city committee. Right here, the second bullet under a civic position. Towards the bottom of the page, she's been on the steering committee for a Philadelphia Parks and Rec effort.
Well, we're looking at that, and we'll accept that. So if we can get Ms. Kishenhand I'm pronouncing that right, I would swear her in and begin with her testimony.
So Chair, if I may just very quickly, obviously I think now's the appropriate time. I'll reassert my objection that the board already heard to Ms. Kissinchan's. I think you can limit her testimony as you need. Simply, again, I'm willing to stipulate to whatever the tree canopy plan or show proposal that Mr. Bonney just presented. It appears to be a civically created document or a city document. That's fine. I'm happy to stipulate that trees have been lost or taken down throughout East Falls and the city, along with additional development. But I don't see how any of that is relevant to this project and this particular property, where there's already been significant testimony that the only trees on the property are overgrowth, and that actually the trees at which the community is concerned is old growth trees that are actually behind our property. We are not the entirety of that greenery that the board was just shown. In fact, we're only the frontage along Merrick and Ridge, which was previously completely cleared by PHA, had 3 towers, and since being demolished by PHA, has simply been left to go fallow. So those are not old growth trees, nor any specimen trees, and we will be planting, as testified, I don't have the number in front of me, 15 to 20 street trees. So with that, I'm happy to stipulate to whatever it is Mr. Bonney wants us to agree to as to trees being important and necessary and should be kept at all costs. We will be doing so, and Ms. Kissinchan can testify to whatever harm she sees at this property, but not generally in the city.
Mr. Chair, I'd ask you to instruct Mr. Whalen to cease interruptions.
Fine, I mean, you have the right to object, don't you?
That was a little more than an objection, I
Well, a
think.
little, but you will
We
admit
have
that you at times go a little bit more than your objections as well. So let's get back on track.
Thank you. Ms. Kissinchan, can you raise your hand, please, and be recognized? Just hit the raise hand button.
And will your witness be testifying specific to this project? Because I think what we're looking at does talk about her 25 years of experience.
Both, yes.
Both what?
Both what?
The value of trees and the value of trees, these particular trees. Yes.
Well, I think Mr. Whelan agreed that there is a value to trees.
Well, let's hear it. Look, Mr. Chairman, this is an environmental case. Mr. Whalen has belittled the environmental value of what is on the property. We have an opportunity to describe it in the way that in our way. He's belittled it the first time by himself. He's not an expert. I'm not sure I saw his resume.
Can we get to the witness?
Yes, Ms. Kissinchan, do you have I'm waiting for her to be recognized. I'm not sure. Is she here yet?
May she raise her hand?
Cynthia, can you raise your hand press the button? Ms. Sunken, can you help her, tell her where it is?
Yes, and she's available to speak. She just has to unmute herself.
Can you unmute yourself, Cynthia?
I raised my hand.
Okay, can we
Okay,
see?
now you're there. Please spell your full name and I'll swear you in, ma'am.
Cynthia, Cynthia, Kishinchand, Kishinchandd.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Bonney.
Okay, Ms. Kissinchan, if you want us to see your face, you have to undo your video or turn on your video. It's up to you, but
We'd like to hear her testimony.
She doesn't have video control, so just audio, Mr. Bonney.
Thank you. It's
Okay.
not necessary, Ms. Kissinger.
okay. Please explain the value of these steep slopes and the habitat they support and why they should be protected.
Steep slopes are part of nature. They have been there for a few decades. The area has always been sloped generally, though I can't speak to any past specific alteration. They now support a wonderful ecosystem. I was there yesterday. Of course, the slopes and the trees handle stormwater, and I think everyone can agree with that. This is a beautiful natural forest. It's not purposely planted or curated, but it is natural. There is value in that. It has been around for at least 20 years. Their trees are quite large, and some of them are very tall. I think some of them are more than 60 feet. I walked it just yesterday, and I observed impressive elm, maple, hackberry, and katsura.
What was that last word, please?
Katsura, Katsura.
And that's a type of tree?
Yes,
Okay, and hackberry was the one before that?
yes,
Hackberry?
correct.
Okay, and of course, we all know elm and maple. How do these forested steep slopes benefit the environment?
Well, I mentioned stormwater. There's also habitat. This forest is habitat for deer, groundhogs, squirrels, rabbits, and chipmunks. It also is habitat for a wide variety of birds.
How many years have you lived in this neighborhood?
50 years,
I'm sorry, 50?
50.
Thank you. Continue.
And the trees also have a cooling effect on the environment. That is important to combat climate change, something I think we are all aware of right now.
How do these forested steep slopes benefit humans?
Well, again, first and foremost, they help clean the air. Clean air is vital for all of us. This is especially important in an area like Ridge Avenue that has so much traffic and that will have so much new traffic from all new development. All those cars will be generating more pollution in the neighborhood. Trees are also stress relievers. Studies show that simply looking at trees can lower someone's blood pressure. Finally, I want to mention the inherent value of nature. It is something we should preserve. It's just not me saying that. That's what the city of Philadelphia says, or Ben Franklin with his Green Country Town goals. And it's not just the tree canopy assessment report, but also it is in the zoning code as explained a few minutes ago.
Is the tree canopy in East Falls in particular increasing or decreasing?
As you mentioned in that report, over that 10-year period, by the way, the report was published in December 2019. The relative decrease was 3% over the past 10 years. And this is despite the efforts of East Falls tree tenders of planting hundreds of trees during that period. So even with our planting trees, there has been a decrease in the tree canopy.
Okay, that was going to be my last question, that the tree tenders, you've been planting numerous trees every year in East Falls, isn't that true?
Yes, we've done, as of this year, we've done about 1,400 trees on 47 streets, plus at local schools.
But you're saying that even more trees are lost, and so that there's been a net negative.
Right. We're not able to keep up with the loss.
I have no further questions for this witness. I want to thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Whalen.
Yes, thank you, Board. I will be extremely brief. Ms. Chant, and I hope I'm saying that last name correctly.
You are.
Thank you. Do you mind putting your address on the record, please?
Oh, of course not. It's 3114 West Coulter Street.
And is that about a mile away from the property?
That's about right, yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, Ms. Chant, are you aware that the steep slopes existing on the property were man-made by PHA?
I have heard that said, yes.
Okay, but you don't have any personal knowledge about that?
No.
Okay.
May I ask you a question? And so what year did they have established them?
Unfortunately, that's not how this works. But Ms. Chant, are you aware of any stormwater management facilities currently on the property?
No.
Okay. And Ms. Chant, I believe you mentioned 4 different types of trees, and I will admit I didn't even know 2 of those were names of trees on the property. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you walk the property?
Yes.
And how many of these types of specimen trees did you identify?
I couldn't count them all because it would be rather treacherous if I had really walked over every area there that had trees. So
Okay.
I'm unable to do that, but it was just crowded with trees and shrubs.
Okay, now, Ms. Chant, have you reviewed the proposed project plans?
Yes,
And did you review the street trees that will be planted at the project?
yes,
And did you count how many street trees will be planted?
I did at the time. I don't remember right now.
Would you agree with me that it's roughly on the order of 15, I believe?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have no further questions, Board. Thank you, Ms. Chant.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you.
I have a next witness if the board is ready.
Yes, please.
Okay, my next witness is Mr. Hilary Langer.
And she's available to speak, Chair.
Mr. Langer, please spell your full name when you get on and I'll swear you in.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, please
Yes.
spell your full name.
Good. Hilary, Hilary, Langer, Langer.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Bonney?
Thank you. Mr. Langer, good morning. What title do you hold at the East Falls Community Council?
I am chair of the East Falls Community Council Zoning Committee.
What is your occupation?
I am a registered architect in Pennsylvania and some other jurisdictions. Also a member of the AIA, American Institute of Architects.
But Board and Mr. Bonney, I'm willing to stipulate to Mr. Langer and his expertise. We don't need to walk through his qualifications.
Thank you.
Okay, I do have one other question though in this category. Do you have experience with residential development?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have experience with cost estimating and determining feasibility?
Yes, in the course of my work, I do deal with cost estimates on a daily basis, really from the review of budgets for proposals, GMPs, guaranteed maximum price.
Okay, thank you.
And also review and approval of change orders
Thank you.
During construction.
Shifting gears, Mr. Langer, how do you look at slopes or steep slopes as an architect?
You know, I think particularly in this neighborhood, I see them as an asset. They can inspire creative, interesting, and very dramatic site layouts. That's a feature of this neighborhood, and one reason why I moved into this neighborhood because of the hilly landscape.
What do you mean asset?
Proximity to the river.
What do you mean? I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by asset?
Well, East Falls, Manayunk, and Roxborough, it's a very hilly part of Philadelphia, uniquely defined by large hills, rocky outcroppings, and as you know, previously occupied by a lot of many water-driven mills and streams. We're used to walking up hills, we cycle up hills, we park on different elevations. My house, I come in at street level and I go to the back and I'm looking down 15 feet onto my backyard. And these are kind of natural features of our neighborhood.
I'm showing some pictures of your neighborhood and how it involves steep slopes. Just going to scroll through a couple pages. What's the one we're looking at here? This is actually elsewhere in lower northwest. Is that correct?
Yes, this is actually one of the accesses off the adjacent proximity to the site, Schoolhouse Lane. And it shows an embankment there between the parking area and the lane.
I'm going to show the other side of it. So tell us just briefly, what are we looking at? Is this the second floor here?
Mr. Bonney, I'm going to have to object. I mean, Mr. Langer can certainly testify to all the projects in the neighborhood if we want, but we all know that there are steep slopes in East Falls. I fail to see any relevance, Chairman, with regard to what other projects look like. Certainly there are other projects and other developments in the neighborhood, but that's not relevant to ours and whether we meet this steep slope.
I tend to agree with you. I mean,
Well,
anyone who knows anything about Roxborough knows it's very steep.
Right,
Uh,
but the point we're making, Mr. Chairman, is that not only is it steep, but that architecture can coexist with the steep slopes, as is shown on the current page.
Well, you could show it as an example, but I'm sure if you can limit the number of examples, that would be helpful.
Okay, this is the last one. What are we looking at here, Mr. Langer? Is this another, well, go ahead.
This is a bridge entry, the main entry into an apartment building in Manayunk. And this shows a connection across an old mill, the development, where actually Ridge Avenue up on the right actually looks down on the roof of this development. But here's a development that is a unique to our kind of neighborhood and is, can become the kind of feature and defining character of any development we do on a slope such as 4401.
Okay, so skipping over a little bit, I want to show you the base plan, which is for steep slopes. This is from the applicant's exhibits. This area in the green is the steep slope of greater than 25% on the subject
Picture didn't
property.
change.
Excuse me?
The picture didn't change. There we go.
Oh, do you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Before we get into your bases and your reasons, please tell us your headline or your conclusion. Can this parcel be developed reasonably and still avoid the steep slopes?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, can you elaborate briefly?
Right. So there's sufficient area on this site that you're looking at right now, above and below the main steep slope area, that was previously occupied by 30 units that were demolished off the site. So basically, the area at the back, the area in the middle, and the area down there on Ridge Avenue are all three zones that can be are available for development.
Okay, and then generally also, thank you. And then also generally, before we get into your reasons, your specific reasons, just as a matter of conclusion, do you think that there is a hardship here?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
The steep slopes here can be completely avoided with a different scheme. But even if you needed to impact them, there are minimum variance options that would be in order, but there's definitely no need to eliminate all the steep slopes on the site.
Okay. The applicant talks about the need to be, as remember from the first hearing or two, the applicant talked about the need to be quote unquote CM, or the desire to be CMX3 commensurate, and points out that they are still not using all of the available FAR. What is your reaction to that?
Well, I disagree with that. You can't just look at base zoning. You have to look at the site holistically and the entire zoning code, including the environmental prohibitions, such as the steep slope provision. The FAR is an upper limit that's provided. It's not a requirement.
You're familiar with the CMX3 provisions of the zoning code?
Yes.
Does CMX3 allow for multifamily dwellings that would read or appear as townhomes? Townhouses?
Yes, CMX3 has a lot of different uses that can go into it, and multifamily would certainly look like a traditional apartment house, or they can be designed to look like townhomes, whether it's attached row or in clusters.
Does CMX3 allow for multiple buildings on a single lot?
Yes. Mhm.
Does CMX3 allow for other uses other than residential?
Yes, there's a very handy matrix issued by city planning and zoning. You could have an adult care facility. I think there was a previous scheme to build a 100-unit independent living facility. You could build a child care center. You could build a community care center, office building, grocery store, hotel, a community garden. I mean, there's a lot of different options.
But let's stick to residential for the time being. Are there examples of nearby residential types of buildings that are different and more modest than that proposed by Atapco? And I'm going to show a document here that shows the subject site in the middle. And what are we looking at to the bottom left?
The roof of a car. There we go. Thank you.
Sorry. Do you see now the
Right.
HL3?
Right. So actually, looking above and below the site, there's right above overlooking the site is the Hilltop development, which is, I think it's condominium association, I think. I'm not sure. And then down on the bottom there, you have the Overlook project, which is 13 townhomes nestled in behind some other existing townhomes. So that's an example of some prototypes that could absolutely be developed on the site.
Okay, and still entirely, if not largely, avoid the steep slopes.
Yes.
You've explored different ways to, the next one is showing a little different angle, which shows on the right-hand side, the Penrose building. Is this the 50-unit senior housing living above one floor of retail?
There's a little bit of a lag.
Okay, sorry.
Pictures change over.
Well, you're familiar with the, Mr. Chair, can you see HL4?
Yes.
There we go. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you see the Penrose building on the right-hand side. I think we all agree it's a 50-unit senior housing building above one floor of retail.
That's right.
Is that
yeah, it's a 50-unit senior housing development with commercial on the lower level.
Okay, is that also?
It's a great concept. It's something that could fit, on this site along Ridge Avenue.
Okay. Let's get into your, you've explored as an architect different ways to develop this property. Let me get your document up here. It may take a minute. You've explored different ways to develop this property and avoid the steep slopes, either entirely or with much less impact than the Atapco proposal. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, let's look at the options that you've generated. Can you see the page that says conceptual option number 1?
Yes.
Okay, first off, you've done some measurements here, and I'd like to confirm with you the measurements that you've measured the square footage of the steep slopes, and that the lower band, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger for the chairman and the members of the board, that the lower band of steep slopes is 2,245 square feet, and that the upper band of the steep slopes is 11,265 square feet. And can you confirm that my math is correct in that the lower band represents 2.7% of the full property, and then the upper band represents 13.7% of the full property. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, I'm gonna plow through this diagram as quickly as I can for the board's benefit and ask you, Mr. Langer, if I'm doing it correctly. In that, so you are showing in purple what you describe here in this box is a 30-unit apartment building. There is a smaller rectangle in the extreme corner that shows where the area of the first floor retail is, but all three levels above it are residential, and also the left-hand side is 4 levels of residential. So I think in this zoning district, you know, you have to have 50% of your first floor with retail, and that's sort of what you've done here.
Correct.
And also, so for 30 units, you've put a driveway that goes, a one-way driveway that enters onto Merrick, right where this arrow is, goes all the way through the site, and then discharges onto Ridge Avenue. And that, am I correct that on either side of that driveway, you've situated 30 parking spaces? Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Now, I do want to take a step back for a second. This is just an idea. Is that what you're putting out here?
Yeah, this is just one strategical approach,
Okay.
not necessarily design. It's one of what could be many.
Okay, thank you.
Was this hypothetical, we'll call it whatever you want, presented to the developer at any of the RCO meetings?
No, it was not.
We're
No.
seeing this for the first time.
Yes.
Right. Well, on Saturday, but yes. Yes. And you have here situated a bridge to connect the parking area to the second floor of the building. Is that correct?
That's right.
And so
let me, pardon the interruption again. I understand, I think I understand where you're going, Mr. Bonney, that you're going to demonstrate to the board that there are alternatives to the plan that's being presented for us to look at and decide on. Wouldn't this be better to have this conversation with the RCO? I mean, we're not going to be planning. I'm not going to sit here and say this is the plan that you should do.
No, of course not. Yes,
So-
I'm happy to respond to that.
Yeah,
No,
please.
and this isn't, we're pointing out here for the board, and we only have a couple more pages, but we're pointing out here for the board that the steep slopes for which they're seeking a variance do not present a hardship to the reasonable development of this property. And so we are showing here an idea, a strategic idea to demonstrate to the board that the applicant has not met its burden, that these steep slopes are in fact a hardship and that they, need to be impacted, certainly to the extent that the developer seeks to impact them. So that's the nature of what we're doing here. We're not trying to negotiate in open court here about this is what we think they should build. That's not what we're doing.
I understand your
Okay.
explanation.
Chairman,
So
if I
what
may
we're-
quickly, just because this is now a third hearing, I'm happy to stipulate that, there are a dozen different ways or more that this could be built. The board chair has already identified that we could build significantly taller. We could build a much larger project than offering 2. That would also be by right. However, there was expert testimony regarding the disturbance of steep slopes, and that testimony was backed up by the Planning Commission stating that any disturbance of steep slopes during construction, footers, foundations, anything does trigger a violation of this zoning code. So even just putting this bridge across does not, clear this issue. So yes, there are dozens and dozens of ways I can ask Mr. Langer, and I'm happy to all of these issues, or we can stipulate that there are lots of different ways that this could be built. However, there's extensive testimony already in the record that we could build much larger as well. And that's not the project in front of the board.
I'd like to plow through. I think we're making good time. It's only 11:35 and we're nearing, we're getting to the end of this witness. May I continue?
Please do.
Okay. So in your opinion, Mr. Langer, would this bridge involve any alteration of the steep slope, or would you be going entirely over it?
No, we'd be going entirely over. the steep
Okay,
slope.
and if you did need to put a column or a post, it would be a smidgen. I know that's not a technical term, but a smidgen of a variance.
Yeah, a smidgen or that support could be completely off the steep slope. That's an
Okay.
engineering solution.
Thank you. Just to round out this exhibit, you're showing the Penrose building here just for purposes of, comparison, that maybe it could
Right.
look like something like this, albeit a bit smaller. And on the right-hand side, you're showing something that we're going to see a little later this morning,
Mhm.
which is from a PHA document showing a little diagram. I want to
That's right.
go to the next page, and we'll go to the next page quickly here. This is a slight variation. Am I correct?
I'm sure it's loading.
Okay, it's option 2. This is a slight variation, correct?
Yeah, I'm not seeing it yet. Don't know about anyone else.
Okay, with a little help from Xfinity, you'll see it. Let me know when you see it.
Mhm.
I'm gonna.
Here we go.
Okay, this is a 50-unit apartment building. It's a little bit more elongated than the one we just saw.
That's right.
And you're showing still 30 parking spaces, which is code compliant. Is that correct?
That's right.
But you
with
have
an
a
option
note.
with an option to put additional spaces up there on the upper part of the lot.
Okay, so you have a note on the top that says parking can be added on rear terrace to get even more parking spaces if you
Mhm.
want. And that would require either a bridge or a small alteration for a bridge over this larger band.
Some steps.
Okay. Let me know when option 3 populates on your screen. Am I correct that option 3 is yet another variation?
Right. That utilizes the rear of the site for development.
Okay,
And,
so you're showing.
and stays away from the steep slope at the high end.
Okay, so you're showing a 40-unit apartment building in the back?
That's right.
And are you
based on how
are you
many-
showing a driveway that goes under that building, and that is there parking for each of those units under that building off of that driveway?
That's right.
Okay. I'm going to show option 4, which is the last option that you've shown. And this you've titled it, the subtitle is minimum variance on steep slope. And I think, am I correct that the major change here,
Right, here we go.
that the major difference here is this orange area. And this orange area is a alteration of the lower band of steep slope, where you're actually flattening out, you're altering and you're flattening out, almost removing 2/3 of the lower band of steep slope. Is that correct?
That's right.
Now, you've been very helpful in that you put the rear of the Penrose building, the 50-unit senior housing building, the rear of that building in the bottom left in a photograph. And I think what you're showing, correct me if I'm wrong, that parking lot is filled in, is fill that slopes right up to the second floor of this building. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so that's what you're showing here, that in orange, that instead of using a bridge, which may or may not require a variance, whether it's a smidgen or not, you're really just flattening out this whole area so that everyone in this parking area can walk or waltz right into the building as if they're doing it here in the Penrose. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, and everything else is pretty much the same. But you're getting 1-for-1 parking here, even though the code requires less. Is that correct?
Yes.
Finally, you're showing on the bottom right. What are you showing on the bottom right?
These are some other Atapco projects, 3 that were pulled out of their portfolio from their website that look like they would be appropriate to this location with balconies and a smaller scale. We're overlooking the river here. We're overlooking trees next to Kelly Drive. So, this kind of prototype, which Atapco are familiar, would be applicable to this situation also.
Okay, so
Mr. Bonnie, before you, with all due respect, how many more exhibits of ideas and
This is the
possible?
left.
This is it?
This is it. This is it. This is it. We have this rendering that would
Okay.
that chose option 4, and that's it. Did you prepare a conceptual rendering of your option 4?
Yes,
Okay, are you looking at it now?
we are.
Okay. How was how did you get to this rendering?
We built a 3-dimensional model based on the topography on the zoning plan submitted by Atapco, sheet 1 of 1. You can't really see it, but the side itself here underneath the buildings is accurately sloped, and I can attest to that.
Okay, so you have first floor retail here on the corner.
That's right.
You've also put in a bunch of other features that I think were discussed at the CDR. For
Right.
instance, materials and the height. And
Chairman, I'm going to object to the further continuation of this. It's been
Why?
asked and answered. We have all of this testimony. We know that there are other options. None of these options have been reviewed by L&I. They're all entirely hypothetical. We're not talking about the project itself at all at this point.
Sustain. And Mr. Bonnie, I think you've made your point. I mean,
okay, thank you. I want to continue. If you,
What are we continuing with?
the rest of the testimony for this witness, I'm going to switch gears. Could you generate additional options, Mr. Langer?
Yes. Definitely more options, and in terms of the way the building looks.
we will stipulate that there are numerous other options that could be developed on this site.
Okay, thank you. How about cost feasibility as to whether these types of things are feasible?
Wouldn't that depend on the size and scope of the project?
Well, I wanted to ask the witness, but if
It could be less, it could be more. I mean, depending on which project you decide to
Well,
develop.
look, in this is residential construction of 3, 4, 5 stories. It's a cheaper construction prototype than one that builds on steep slope that's 8, 9 stories tall with elevated decks of parking.
Understood. There are, again, it goes back to there are other options, and we will stipulate to that. Counsel for the applicant has even stipulated to that.
Okay, I want to move on to the last part of the last category. I want to show that in the lower northwest plan, they have a section called Planning Recommendations. And in that Planning Recommendations section, first they talk about this area, which is more the Wissahickon area. And then on the next page, they have a very particular section here that has what I call a red lasso. The property that we're talking about is this, that the Planning Commission is showing in this diagram a sort of long, narrow building in yellow. and it says up to 250 multifamily housing units possible near the Falls Bridge. And this is Ridge Avenue, and the Planning Commission is saying there's up to 250 multifamily housing units possible.
Right.
They're also showing in the
Mr.
lower.
Bonney, I'm going to object. Are you asking a question or are you trying to testify here?
I'm
It's
plowing
like a
through.
closing argument, isn't? I mean, you've been
No,
making what sounds like to me like a closing argument, that
This-
there are options and all.
I was told that I was able to present these documents lightning fast, and I'm almost done.
Okay.
And it says here on page 94 that the major recommendation is maintain low density development in these falls. And finally, that is what is being discussed in the change to, relative to the change to CMX3. That is the plan. Now I'm going to go back to Mr. Langer, and I'm going to show him the comparison chart. First, I'm going to focus on the bottom part of the chart of this diagram that was this document generated by a member of your committee under your supervision?
Yes.
Okay. This is what we just looked at. This image is from the lower Northwest plan, and it shows the 250 possible units being recommended for this area in the lasso. And just to go through your calculations here, there are already 337 units constructed or approved in that red area. Looking from the bottom up, these annotations on the right-hand side were prepared by you and your colleague on the committee. The Howe project is 136 units. The Falls Bridge, 46 units. Grasso, which is in the ground and currently under development, 142 units, and that is the 337. If you would add in the Atapco project that's before us today, which would be 185 units, you would be at 522 units, more than twice the density recommended by the city plan. Did I go over that correctly?
That's right. And also I'd add that the 4442 Ridge is also well under construction.
Okay, thank you. Which is the 136 units.
Right.
Okay. At the top of the page here, this is really just to respond to the applicant's questioning of our witnesses about that we're in support of the Howe project and we were in support of the Grasso project. Am I reading this correctly by your tabulations that the Atapco project is taller, significantly taller than those other two projects? The Atapco project is more density in terms of number of units and also in terms of number of beds when you add up the 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, etc.
Yes.
Okay. Finally, I want to ask you something about the section of the zoning code for variances. And isn't it correct that under the section for variances about what you need to get a variance, there is a special section for steep slope variances. And under this section for steep slope variances, it says where any earth disturbance will occur on a steep slope of 25% or greater, the zoning board shall approve a variance only if the applicant demonstrates that the application meets the following criteria as certified by a professional engineer, and that point 1, point A says that any requested variance for the property will not result in an increase in stormwater runoff. I'd like to ask you, Mr. Langer, you've reviewed the materials submitted to this board by the applicant. Has the applicant made a showing by a professional engineer that this project, in other words, that this variance, that this project will not result in an increase in stormwater runoff? Have you seen that?
I'm going to object now because Mr. Bonney's own question certifies that Mr. Langer is not appropriate witness to testify to that. Mr. Bonney's question said, an opinion of a professional engineer. This is not the scope, stormwater management is not the scope of a work of an architect. You know, expert documents have already been presented. They've already been stamped and approved by the Planning Commission for stormwater management and this project. And so, you know, the earth moving plan and everything that Mr. Bonney is pointing at has already been presented to this board. And Mr. Langer has no ability to make an opinion as to that.
You don't, yes, he does.
Mr. Langer, I have a question, Mr. Langer, going back to some of the hypotheticals that you and Mr. Bonney spoke to. Would any of those hypothetical projects add an increase to the stormwater runoff?
No.
No?
No. I mean, you know, what you've seen there are conceptual proposals, and obviously it would need to be further developed beyond the scope of a zoning hearing, beyond the scope of a community proposal with engineers appropriately to take it to that level. But the goal would be absolutely no increase in stormwater runoff, complete filtration on the site, pervious surfaces wherever possible, underground retention basins. And if it were me, I would say we would exceed the code and average maximum rainfall per hour of 4.5 inches.
We
Which
wouldn't know
in-
any of that until you really drill down on the plan.
Right.
Well, what other work would you need, would an engineer need? You've worked with engineers doing stormwater plans, is that correct?
Right. But yes, absolutely. But that's a process that takes place over many weeks and a lot of meetings with a lot of calculations. You need a geotechnical survey, subsurface.
I understand that, sir. I understand that. I just was curious that it's possible, correct?
Yeah.
Final question.
Possible that those hypotheticals might not be able to be developed because they may adversely affect the stormwater runoff and other items that we're looking at on this slide that is up now.
Well,
We just don't know.
Well, I don't think that's his testament. I think he said,
I'm
yes,
asking.
absolutely. I think he said, yes, or absolutely, but you'd have to do the work.
Right.
Got to do the work. Yeah.
Yeah. And
All right.
has that
All right, I
been-
don't want to belabor that, but you threw a lot of hypotheticals in there. I'm just curious.
Absolutely.
How that
But my final question is that has that work, has that homework, has those calculations of those measurements been submitted to the board by the applicant in this case, Mr. Langer?
I don't know if I've seen those in the exhibits or in the final zoning application.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Mr. Bonney, are you complete with your witness?
Yes, I am.
No other witnesses from your side?
Yes.
Chairman, I have.
We're up to 5 minutes to 12, which is way past the hour on one side. Yes, Mr. Whalen.
I just wanted to state that I do have, unfortunately, some extensive questioning from Mr. Langer on cross, as that was, I hate to say inappropriate on a number of accounts, but also factually incorrect on many.
Okay. Proceed.
Mr. Bonney, are you still sharing your screen?
Someone is scratching their microphone or something. Try that again, Mr. Whalen.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bonney, I was asking if you are still sharing your screen.
I stopped. Maybe it'll take a second, but I stopped.
Okay.
And does the court reporter need a break?
Chair, I'm okay to continue if you are.
Okay, we'll proceed.
Okay. I don't know if anyone else has, but I have completely lost Zoom on my screen. I can hear you, but I can't see anything.
I can see you, but nothing else other than you and Paul and the names of the folks that are Pauline.
So Mr.
Sorry.
Mr. Wellen, if you could, maybe go out and come back in, we will pause accordingly.
So why don't we do this? Let's take 5 minutes.
Let's take a break.
All
Right.
right, let's do that. Let's take 5 minutes and get that straightened out. Thank you.
Mr. Whalen, this is Pauline from IT. I can also see you, so I'm wondering if your Zoom is just minimized and you can see like the website, but not the Zoom application. So if you scroll along the bottom, does any of it?
There you go. I brought it back up. It was actually, it had actually closed. And I just
Okay.
re-listened.
Mr. Whalen,
Yes, Ms. Sunken.
I think we have, where you are maybe shuffling papers or something, and it affects the audio. We can hear it, and it's a little disturbing in your mic.
Okay, I will.
Okay, just be
attempt not to
conscious
do
of
that
that.
for
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Whalen.
Are we ready? Are we back online? Is the court reporter available? First, John.
I am, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tanya and Pauline, we're ready to go?
Yes, Chair, we can continue.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Whalen?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And I understand the timing issue here for today and that we have to finish, so I will be as brief as possible. Is Mr. Langer still on?
Mr. Langer, please unmute yourself.
How's that?
Perfect. Thank you.
Very good. I can hear you now, Mr. Langer.
Okay.
Mr. Langer, I'm not going to try to be curt, but I'm going to try to get to the point because we have some time constraints today. Mr. Bonney began your testimony by asking you about, looked like 6, 7, 8 different projects that also involved potentially steep slopes in the East Falls area. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. Are you saying existing buildings?
He showed you a number of site photos. The last one stopped on Yarn Factory Lofts, and I was not sure what the other ones referenced.
Okay.
For each of those site photos shown in those proposed projects that are existing, did you do a similar zoning analysis as you've done here about any steep slopes that were affected or variances that were required?
No, I did not.
Okay. So you don't know what situations happened for each one of those matters shown by Mr. Bonney that led to the either existing building being redeveloped or, which would not be the case here, or a new building being constructed, do you?
Actually, I'm familiar with one of those mill redevelopment projects, but in terms of same detailed analysis, no.
Okay, thank you very much. So moving on, you, again, trying to speed things along here, you testified that there were multiple smaller options that could be built on this site, correct?
That's right.
And would you also agree that multiple larger options or taller buildings could be built on this site?
That is allowable within CMX3.
Okay. Now, are you aware that we have, this proposed project has 185 units?
Yes.
And offers essentially one-to-one parking?
That's right.
Now, EFCC has objected to not having enough parking. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. I would suggest to the board that it's in the RCO letter. I don't need to go back to it.
So noted.
Now, Mr. Langer, would you agree with me that each of your options shown, 1, 2, 3, and 4, show approximately one-to-one parking?
That's right.
Okay. Now, also for each one of your options shown, options 1, 2, 3, and 4, each option would also require the clearing of the site, at least to some extent, if not entirely, correct?
On the buildable portions of the site, yes, upper and lower. Mm-hmm.
So you would be removing significant growth in trees there, correct?
Yes, we would.
Okay. Now, have any of your 4 options been submitted to and or reviewed by the City Department of Licenses and Inspection?
Nope.
Okay. And you said that none of your options had any analysis done for stormwater management, correct?
That's right. These options are not engineered at this point.
Now, Mr. Langer, you've, I believe, were you at both of the prior hearings?
Yes.
And you heard the testimony that there is currently no stormwater management system or facilities on the site, correct?
I don't recall. I'm sorry.
Okay, well,
didn't
if
understand
I
your
represented to you that there is currently no stormwater management on site other than the natural conditions that exist, would you disagree with that?
The existing site.
The existing site,
As
4401.
it exists. Yeah, it's covered in trees.
Right. And Mr. Langer, you are not a licensed engineer in the state of Pennsylvania, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So you would not perform any stormwater management analysis on the existing site with regard to the proposed project, correct?
I would not do that, but as a lead project coordinating architect, I would certainly be involved in that engineering and that coordination.
Okay. Now, Mr. Langer, Mr. Bonney asked you if you had experience with residential construction, and you said you did. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Do you have experience with large mixed-use commercial residential projects like the one proposed?
Yes.
Okay. And have you taken any projects with regard to steep slopes through the review process with the Department of Licenses and Inspections in Philadelphia and or the Planning Commission?
No.
Okay. So you would not be aware of how the Planning Commission determines whether steep slope variance is required, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Would you disagree with me if I suggested that prior testimony and corroboration from the Planning Commission in this matter in the prior hearings stated that any disturbance during of foundations, footings, or even during construction or materials of steep slopes would require a variance?
I don't understand the question.
Okay. I'll move on. Mr. Langer, a couple of your options showed hypothetical curb cuts and driveways along Ridge Avenue, correct?
That's right.
Did you propose any such driveway or curb cut along Ridge Avenue to either PennDOT or the Philadelphia Streets Department?
No.
Okay. Did you hear the prior testimony from our witnesses, the developers' witnesses, that is, that PennDOT and the Streets Department would not approve any curb cut or driveway along Ridge Avenue?
I do not recall that part of the testimony.
Okay. Thank you. I will quickly just ask you a couple questions about, so I'm going to share my screen. Mr. Langer, can you see my screen? I believe I'm showing conceptual option number 3, 70 units.
That's correct.
Okay. And up in this top corner that I'm circling right now with my cursor, you show a driveway for potential parking.
That's right.
Okay. Now, that driveway would actually disturb the steep slopes in that corner of the property, correct?
According to the topographical plan, there is some slope there, but it's not above 25%.
Have you analyzed the site survey or the existing conditions for this project?
I looked at the zoning drawing submitted by Atapco. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you're aware that there's currently existing a driveway from the PHA development that exists essentially in the location that you're showing now?
Right, there's a small little driveway that goes in and a small flat area. Mm-hmm.
Now, do you understand that that driveway is actually only half on the property that is 4401 Ridge and is actually half on property that is not subject of this project?
I think I'm not sure of the intimate details of exactly what's on or what's off.
Okay. Thank you. Now, I think we've already shown that in your options 3 and 4 here, and even option 2, you are proposing development immediately abutting 25% grade or higher steep slopes. Is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So in order to immediately
there's a buffer. There's a buffer.
But in order to immediately abut, similar to the photo that's showing up here, I think it's called Cotton Hill, there would need to be some kind of retaining wall or other shoring or foundation work to prevent the steep slope from sliding. Is that correct?
The intent would be not to provide build retaining walls.
Okay. Now, Mr. Langer, you testified as to a determination of feasibility with regard to this project, right?
As far as, yes, absolutely.
Now, feasibility necessarily depends on the price paid for the land, correct?
Yes, it does.
And this project, this property was sold, or are you aware that this property was listed for sale at an open bidding by PHA?
Yes.
Okay. And are you aware of what the final purchase price was for this property?
I think so, but I wouldn't want to say if my memory served me 100% correct.
Understood, but that would obviously affect feasibility as you testified.
That's right.
Now, Mr. Langer, I've just clicked to show you a zoning map that was previously entered in this matter. You see highlighted here, this is the property 4401 Ridge Avenue, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you understand that there's a very large snake-like property behind us that's also CMX3 between us and the Hilltop project, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And this, where I'm showing the cursor right up here, this is what you have described as the Hilltop project, correct?
That's right.
And the zoning for that property is actually RM1?
Yes.
Okay. And the property, the 2 blocks over here with homes, and again, continuing over here on the other side of Palisades Drive, that property is also zoned RM1, correct?
Right.
And then you go down to what Mr. Bonney described as the Penrose building, senior building, that's zoned CMX2?
That's right.
2.5.
Sorry, yes, you're correct, Mr. Bonney, 2.5. And you're understanding that the underlying zoning districts of RM1 and CMX 2.5 have widely disparate zoning characteristics in the code than CMX 3, correct?
They have different limits.
Now, again, Mr. Langer, you testified with regard to 4442 and 4300, these 2 projects over here, colloquially called the Howe and Grasso projects.
That's right.
And those are both CMX3 properties as well, correct?
That's right.
Okay. And getting to the end here, but ultimately you or someone under you prepared this document that's not labeled, but it says Atapco is taller and more dense?
That's right.
All right. Now beginning, you say Atapco at 4401 Ridge, the height is 92 feet 4 inches. May I ask where you calculated that from?
From the documents presented to zoning on your documents.
Would you disagree with me if I said that those documents actually reflect a height at the highest point along the ridge line of 82 feet?
We can go look at the documents. But if you go up to the height of your parapets, I believe there's a number in there which states 92 feet 4 inches.
I will disagree, but move on.
But let's
now, Mr. Langer.
If it's 88 feet or 92 feet, then
Mr. Langer, I'm asking you questions right now. You need to answer the questions that I'm asking you.
He's trying to answer.
With regard to the Howe 4442 Ridge project, you show a height of 70 feet 10 inches, correct?
Right.
And that height is actually the effective height along Ridge Avenue, correct?
That is the effective height above average grade. Mm-hmm.
But at Ridge Avenue, you're talking about this project over here.
Yes. Oh,
okay. And similarly, the Grasso project at 43.
The 92 foot 4 inches is actually the height of your building above average grade. It's on one of your documents.
So, Mr. Langer, I'm asking you, the Grasso project at 4300 Ridge is, you have listed as 68 feet 9 inches. Mm-hmm. That again is down along Ridge Avenue, correct? With no steep slopes?
That's right.
Okay. And do you recall what the height of the proposed project is along Ridge Avenue?
That is considerably lower because right there you're only, I believe it's 4 stories above retail. Significantly lower.
So the height here reflective against the height shown here reflective against the ridge, and the 2 other projects on Ridge are not measuring apples to apples. They're actually measuring a height significantly measured up along the slope as opposed to two heights measured at grade along Ridge Avenue, correct?
That's right. This height actually reflects the height opposite 2-story homes.
Okay. Now, Mr. Langer, are you familiar with the size of these 3 projects by square footage, land size of these 3 projects?
I would have to go to a cheat sheet to be able to speak accurately about square footage.
Okay, and in this information is in the record already, but I will represent to you just for the purposes of moving forward. The Atapco project and our project is approximately 82,000 square feet. The Howe project is approximately 31,000 square feet. And the Grasso project is approximately 70,000 square feet. So would you disagree that the Atapco project has a much larger land size than the other 2 projects?
I'm sorry, I can't attest to the data you just presented. I don't have that in front of me, so I can't agree or disagree.
Okay, so where you calculate total number of units, that is not adjusting for any kind of density per square foot or the number of square feet on the site for the units provided, correct?
No, but I do know you can do more and you can do less. You chose to do 185 units.
But you would agree with me, correct, that if you put 100 units on a small property, that density would impact the neighborhood differently than 100 units on a very large property, correct?
That's right.
Okay, thank you. And now here, this chart right here references a page from the Lower Northwest District Plan, correct? 12/9/2014.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Are you aware that this property and actually the properties across the street were upzoned from CMX 2.5 to CMX 3 in 2016?
There was a process that produced that result, yes.
Okay, so there was a public process to bring about the lower Northwest District Plan, and then actually 2 years later, there was a process to upzone the property rather, to CMX 3?
That's right.
Okay. Now, it's been previously testified to by the EFCC president. Both the Howe and Grasso projects were supported by EFCC, correct?
That's right.
Okay. So is this just a first come, first served issue? The neighborhood is now feeling like it's agreed to too many units?
Objection.
He can't, I don't think he's the right person to ask for that. He can't answer on behalf of all the community. It's a statement.
Respectively, he's here not testifying as Mr. Hillary Langer individually. He's here testifying as the head of the zoning board for EFCC, the community.
Mr. Langer, can you answer that question?
Sorry, with all the interjections before that, I can't remember the specifics of the question, but is it first come, first serve? Absolutely not. The way we're looking at this site is that it's adjacent to two-story homes and neighbors who will be directly affected by this development. It's a different site, it's a different situation than the Grasso or the Howe projects down there on Kelly.
Okay.
It's on its own merits.
Understood. I have no further questions, Chairman.
All right. Here's the game plan, gentlemen. It is now 12:24. Mr. Bonnie, I think we were much more generous than we anticipated with you earlier. I mean that respectfully. I went well beyond the 1 hour. I understand you may have two witnesses left.
They're both pretty short. One is extremely short. Maybe
okay. And what I want to say next is there may be other people from the community who want to testify. So without any objection, Mr. Whalen, we will go to Mr. Bonnie's witnesses.
No, Chair, I would love to do that because by all means, this project must finish today.
Exactly right. Thank you. Mr. Bonnie?
My next witness is Raymond Adams, who's going to be extremely brief. Can you raise your hand, Mr. Adams?
Mr. Adams, please identify yourself for the records, spell your last name, and I will swear you in.
Do you see him, Ms. Sunken?
Yep, I see his name. Here he is.
Okay.
Mr. Adams, please spell your full name and I'll swear you in.
Okay, my name is Raymond Adams.
Mr. Adams, there's an echo.
Yes.
Do you have another device on?
No, I don't, but I do have a hearing piece. Maybe I'll take that off and just, let me turn that off and see if that helps.
There.
Okay, can you hear me? Is it better now?
Try that again.
Hello?
No,
Is it better now?
A little bit better. Yep. Spell your name.
Okay, my name is Raymond Adams. That's R-A-Y-M-O-N-D, Adams, A-D-A-M-S.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please proceed. Mr. Bonnie?
Yes, I just want to show the picture with Mr. Adams' house on it, but I'll just really turn it over to Mr. Adams. I'm putting my cursor. Let me know when you see the aerial, Mr. Chair.
We see it.
Okay, I'm putting my hand right here. He's at the end unit right here on this lighter shade of roof. Mr. Adams, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Okay, again, my name is Raymond Adams, and I live at 3709 Fall Circle in the Hilltop area. And I am definitely opposed to the building of this home, this establishment down there on 4401 Ridge Avenue. My house is basically right there. It's right there. And one of the reasons why I purchased this home was the location and how the neighborhood was actually formulated. We have a very nicely diversified community where there are several homeowners who really enjoy, being able to take small walks and things of that sort. But one of the things I really enjoy the most is in the morning times when I actually go up to my deck or either looking out on my third floor or second floor and just look over the greenery, looking at the river and looking at almost like a Rockwell painting. When I look at that, it gives me such a soothing feeling. I'm able to sit out there and have my cup of coffee. I watch the dew as the sun comes up and overshadows the place. And it's really a lovely community. It really is. My neighbors to my right, they actually live on a street called Riverview. If this building was actually built, they would no longer have a view of the river. And that's one of the main reasons why I, along with my neighbors, have built this. I went along and worked along with other people in our community to put a petition together to try to get people to sign on. And the response was incredible. There are so many people in our area that really oppose this large building. We do not oppose growth and moving forward. We just oppose the large building that they're deciding to build down at the foot of our homes. Prior to the pandemic and even during the pandemic as well, the driving down there is very, very hard. You have to negotiate yourself to come out to the roadway. And it's surprising to me after hearing on some of the previous calls that they had a traffic survey and it came out to be a good survey. I just found that impossible. Prior to them coming on, there was another group that came through that sat down with us and tried to work through it. And then one of the things they asked us was some of the problems we had, and traffic was one of them. But like I said, I live out here, and I live up in a beautiful area, a beautiful neighborhood with greenery and things of that sort. Just Saturday, my wife and I was looking outside the window, and we watched a full deer come. Deer just walked up to our homes on the other side of the gate, and one was a buck. And it was so nice. And I told my wife, where would they live if they built this place here? Will we see this ever again? I don't think we will. This building is just too large. We're not opposed to the building. We're just opposed to having this large building. We would like to have something maybe a little smaller, something that goes along.
Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Do you have any cross, Sean, or can I go to the last witness?
No, I have no questions for Mr. Adams. Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Okay, thank you. My last witness is Roseanne DeStuart, but before she testifies, and I'm just going to encapsulate this in the interest of time, we've submitted documents from showing that there used to be a public housing development on this 28-acre site called Schuylkill Falls that had high rises and low rises, and that in the late 90s, it was by federal financing, by a grant from federal financing, demolished, and a new vision was agreed to by all the stakeholders, including this sort of phase 1, this phase 2 where Mr. Adams lives, and then the phase 3, which is where the subject property is, and a smaller building was proposed. I'm not even going to go through these, but I'm just going to flash to in the late 90s when all this redevelopment planning occurred. There was a lot of community engagement.
Mr. Bonney, the document has been accepted into the record. It was discussed extensively at the prior hearing. If you could call your witness, please.
Thank you, Sharon.
All right. Well, I'll assume that the board will have reviewed these documents.
We will review. Call your witness, please.
Ms. Stewart, are you?
Yes, and she's available to speak.
Okay. Ms. Stewart, I think you have some testimony prepared, so the floor is yours.
Miss, ma'am, please spell your full name and I'll swear you in.
ROXANNEDESTOUET.
You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please proceed.
I have it.
You can proceed.
Okay. Thank you and good afternoon. I have attended every ZBA hearing for the 4401 Avenue proposal by Atapco. During the last ZBA hearing, I heard the word harm used. My personal experiences have been harmful throughout the revitalization process of my community, along with the population of residents that were supposed to benefit from the redevelopment of the Schuylkill Falls community. There was plenty of harm caused by the experiences of living through this process of revitalization. I was moved around the revitalization process. When the high-rise buildings were demolished, they pounded on my door early in the morning, ordering me to evacuate.
Ma'am, with all due respect, we've been through this. I mean, we understand what previously existed on this site. Apologize for any inconvenience it posed to you and your family, but could you speak to the issues as to why you're opposed to this project?
And I think I should be allowed to finish because, as I said, I've sat through each one of these zoning hearings. So what I am saying is very important to me, and I think it needs to be heard and I need to be listened to.
Okay, we're willing to hear it.
Thank you.
Sorry, this is the Zoning Board Administrator, Tanya. Please be advised, the chair requested testimony regarding zoning of this project only. Thank you very kindly.
Okay. So I feel like I'm being looked over. I feel like there was no communication, no notification given to the Falls Ridge community neighbors about the 4401 sale of the property to build 185 apartments. PHA has not involved the community, and at this point, neither has Atapco. Today, I am remembering and I'm reminded about all the memories those promises made to my community of the Schuylkill Falls by the Philadelphia Housing Authority and the City of Philadelphia. At this point, I need to share a quote from the president of the Residents Council at Schuylkill Falls, Mrs. Trelly Johnkin. She is no longer with us, but in her past, she said, "Decisions are made about us without us. It sure feels this way again. It seems the 4401 project was headed in the same direction. And today my community is better informed because we are now listening. We have plenty to say about the 4401 Ridge Avenue proposal. The harm to the community we will suffer by developing this Ridge Avenue corridor. There is a list, the density. The whole purpose of the revitalization was to lower the density on the former Schuylkill Falls site. This is what was promised, and this is what we currently have because of that revitalization. And the part that Atapco is trying to develop is phase 3, and that was promised to also be low density. Our traffic, I can tell you from my own experience, peak hour traffic is already congested in this area on Ridge Avenue daily. Adding drivers and parking for 185 plus cars will add to the stress traveled by commuters. The proposal will create an increase of problems for drivers on Merrick Road. It is already difficult to navigate to Ridge Avenue from Merrick Road, especially during morning peak hours. Vehicles are always entering and exiting the community from every intersection surrounding East Falls. This community is aware of those issues. We have traffic gridlock daily when other arteries in and around the city have problems. Next, I want to say the characteristics of our community. By adding this very large 185 unit apartment to this area will not help this section of the city in any way. It will cause more harm to our daily lives for many years to come. The images of our community will change. Looking at the size, the density, and the atmosphere of the Atapco building will not enhance the community's attractiveness. This design building just does not fit here. It is not accepted by neighbors in this neighborhood. The personal harm caused for me, that is the reminder of the broken promises made by the Philadelphia Housing Authority and the developers for redeveloping the Schuylkill Falls community to the residents that lived here during the Hope 6 project. I still have those thoughts and many of the memories which are hard to forget. The Atapco building is a big step backwards for our neighbor. This large structure, Atapco 185 unit apartment building, reminds me of the high rises, which sat on the top portions of the site years ago. Those high-rise buildings were imploded because of many problems. They were eyesores to the city of Philadelphia from Route 76 East and West. In addition, those buildings were unattractive to the East Falls community. That's why they were imploded. All these reasons led the Philadelphia Housing Authority, the city government, the East Falls community, along with the Schuylkill Falls residents, to decide and agree to remove those buildings with funds from the federal government. All the promises were low density, and they would be built in low density. Falls Ridge and Hilltop are the experience of those works. An unsafe and unhealthy public housing development from the 1950s was transformed. Now we are a community. We have some units that are subsidized and some are home ownerships. We are not perfect, but we are a successful community. Thanks to all of the hard work that was done. We all know each other. We have small streets, we have front lawns, we have barbecues, we have graduation parties, and many other events. The Atapco building should be in another area. It has nothing to do with us. It will fundamentally change the character of our neighborhood.
Ms. DeStewart, have you circulated a petition in Falls Ridge and Hilltop?
Yes.
I'm showing on the screen a location map of all of those signatures. The tally that we counted up that has been submitted to the board shows 131 signatures, and the blue dots on the right-hand side show all the households in your area, the Falls Ridge area, that have signed the petition. Unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, the Hilltop development is condominium development, so our good friends at Google Maps are not able to put a blue pushpin in the 20 homes in Hilltop that have signed, but there should be 20 blue dots.
We'll stipulate to that.
Okay. And this has been submitted, so I don't have to go through. Well, I guess I should just read it says, I live in Falls Ridge or Hilltop.
Mr. Bonnie, I'm not trying to be rude. We'll stipulate that this petition was circulated into the, whatever the meaning of it is. We're at 1241.
I'm finished. Mr. Whalen, do you have any cross-examination?
I have no questions for Mr. Stewart. Thank you, Mr. Stewart.
Are there any other
You're
witnesses?
Not from me. I would note that
I'm asking the general public, actually, if there's any other witnesses. I'll get back to you, Mr.
I just wanted to mention that I did receive
The chair will get back to you.
Here we have Michelle. Michelle, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes, please spell your full name, ma'am, and I'll swear you in.
Yes, Michelle Feldman, Michelle Feldman.
Swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please proceed.
I have a statement today on behalf of the board president of the East Falls Development Corporation, and I currently serve as the executive director of the East Falls Development Corporation. So unfortunately, our board chair had to leave the Zoom call early, so this was the statement that she had prepared. I speak today as board president of the East Falls Development Corporation. The EFDC's Economic Development Committee and board strongly support the proposed plans by Atapco for the site of 4401 Ridge Avenue. I've personally been a resident of East Falls for 15 years and on the EFDC board for 9. This particular PHA block of Ridge has been vacant for years. This greatly hinders our neighborhood's ability to build a safe, walkable commercial corridor that connects to the northern end of East Falls, a key goal of our district's Philadelphia 2035 plan. We believe Atapco has been attentive in responding to the majority of the neighborhood's aesthetic concerns over time and to those that address stormwater management and safe transit. In addition, Atapco's plans include much-needed mixed-use space along the East Falls business corridor. The larger, more flexible commercial space is needed to retain existing growing businesses and to attract new businesses to serve our community. The development we are discussing today could not be better timed for positive impact. This project is slated to occur within the same time frame as other positive CMX3 parcel developments along that block. EFDC stands ready to make sure this new potential development leads to a stronger corridor that supports our community, serves as a destination, brings additional public investments to our infrastructure, and provides new opportunities to connect residents to streetscape design improvements on the Ridge Avenue corridor and the Schuylkill River. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask a question or two?
Please.
Just to confirm, Ms. Feldman, your EFDC is not an RCO, although it is a CDC. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And was there anything in your statement that spoke to specifically 185 units?
No, nothing specifically that spoke to the number of units.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. No further questions.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Ms. Feldman, I would simply ask your statement that you just read and the letter that you previously submitted, or that EFDC, not you personally, but yes, EFDC previously submitted, were both in support of this project as presented, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to testify? We have less than 5 minutes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Ms. Dandy. I was just going to say, my understanding is Mr. Steve Fillmore was going to be on behalf of EFF, the other registered RCO, who is in support of the project. I don't know if he's here or not.
I'm not seeing anybody by that name, but I have Miss Bell. Oh, and he'll be next.
Are you speaking to me?
Yes, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, you can hear me then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Joanne Bell, and I live at 3701 Falls Circle in the Hilltop community. And
ma'am, just 1 second. You're going to get sweared.
Ms. Bell, I'm sorry, I need to swear you in. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please proceed.
Again, my name is Joanne Bell, and I live at 3701 Falls Circle in the Hilltop community. And I come from a position that you don't put something in a community that the community doesn't want, nor do you take your advice from people who do not live in the community that is going to be affected by it. I bought a home in 2008 in the Hilltop community because it was a part of the Hope 6 project that was experimental and that is working. And it's something that could be duplicated throughout the city. And that is that you have affordable housing mixed with high-end housing in a neighborhood that makes it work. We live in a city with almost 30% poverty. And the projects like this is what we want to support. But what we don't want is developers cramming lots and lots of projects into an area where it changes the characteristic of the area. And that's what this project does. When I moved here in 2008, I could exit the development within a minute. In the mornings, it takes up to 20 minutes to get out. Each project that we have been told through a zoning process that we're not going to be affected in that way, cars are now jamming into the neighborhood. This isn't fair to the people who made investments in this community. It is unfair to us, and our voices should be heard. And I'll end with, when we say that we don't want something, we ought to be heard and we ought to be listened to. We are the ones who live here, not the investors who come to make a profit. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now at 12:48. I just wanted to let the record know, if I didn't mention this earlier, that a letter came in from Councilman Jones. I'm going to read it quickly. In the last several months, I have had numerous conversations with all the stakeholders regarding the project at this location. I appreciate the advocacy of all those who have an interest in this development. I support the neighbors who wish to see this project scaled back to a building that is less dense and which will better coexist with surrounding developments. I am committed to working with the neighbors, the project owner, and all advocacy groups on a project that is suitable at this location. As always, please feel free to contact me with any questions or concerns. Having said that, Mr. Whalen, that last witness, did you have a question? You got less than a minute.
No, Mr. Chair, he is not my witness. There's 2 registered RCOs in the neighborhood. East Falls Forward is the other one, and Mr. Fillmore is the president of that.
And we have a letter of support.
Fillmore, could you briefly give us your full name? I'll swear you in, and then briefly describe what your testimony would be. Yes, please spell your full last name. You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? Please proceed. I don't mean to rush you, but we are bound by regulations to close this hearing down at 1 o'clock. Thank you.
I have one question. Can I have one question?
Mr. Bonnie,
Well, Mr. Fillmore, thank you. It sounds like your organization took an official vote. In that vote, how many votes were in support? I believe it was 31. Is that correct? Does 31 to 6 ring a bell? Thank you. No further questions.
Chairman, thank you very much for you and the board's time. I'm happy to end here without any further ado, because closing arguments are due in writing, not in person, by next Monday at noon. I'm happy to do that, and I anxiously await your vote next Wednesday.
I agree, and I want to thank the board for its time, Chair and Ms. Vice Chair also, and the rest. Thank you.
Excuse me, I believe we still have to get the recommendation of the planning commission.
Oh,
Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, David Fecto, City Planning Commission. The comprehensive plan recommends this property for commercial mixed use. The zoning map here dates to 2016. The proposed use is in keeping with that designation. In addition, this project completed the civic design review process. As a result of that process, the applicant made multiple revisions, including to the loading dock layout. Given the hardship generated by the grading associated with the site's previous use, we recommend that the board grant the variance for steep slope disturbance.
Okay, thank you. Again, gentlemen, we're awaiting your closing statements to be submitted by Monday, October 25th by noon on that date.
by noon.
Any
Chairman
unfinished
or
business?
Vice Chairwoman, I just have one quick question. Do you have any limitations on the page limitations that you would like to set on our closing arguments? I just want to make sure I'm doing what you guys want.
Excuse me, Mr. Whalen, no. There are no
Okay.
page limitations. But, if we could announce that the record is otherwise closed.
The record is closed. And as to your question, remember there are trees that have to produce paper.
Of
All right.
course.
Little levity helps at times. All right,
Always.
thank you. So the record is closed. Board will render a discussion next Wednesday at next Wednesday's board meeting, executive board meeting.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Tanya, we have any unfinished business?
No, Chair.
Okay, all. Thank you all. See you back at